Imagine, if you will, those 3 a.m. thoughts about time, space, or the odd and unusual things. These are not your everyday topics. These curiosities about the world and us seem more fiction than fact. This is a journey of enlightenment on subjects that fascinate the mind. Our findings may not change your views or beliefs, but let us share what we have researched along the way. Buckle up as we show you what we've discovered down the rabbit hole.
Hey everyone, welcome back to What If Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm Will.
I'm Terry.
And this is Jefferson.
This is Jefferson. He's the newest member of our crew. He's our white rabbit.
100%.
Yeah, so he's Jefferson.
You should follow him down the rabbit hole.
Yes, with us. That's what we're going to do today.
Right? Speaking of down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Which rabbit hole are we going down today?
Today we're going down something that I call angels or aliens.
A very popular topic these days.
It is. It's interesting. First off, I just want to preface, as we do with everything here, we do not wish to offend anybody's cultural or religious beliefs. We're not trying to challenge anybody's cultural or religious beliefs with this. This is just an open mind perspective. We're just asking questions and have an open mind, suspend some disbelief, and enjoy the information that we've prepared for you here today. That's all I want to say. Preface, because some people get a little bit upset when you say something that challenges what they were raised to believe, and I understand that completely.
So if this differs from anything you've learned, been taught, or believe across anything, take it with a grain of salt. We're not saying this is fact.
No, we're here. This is, believe it or not, this is actually fun for me. I have an interest in stuff like this, so it's actually quite fun for me. So just have fun, enjoy the ride, and take what you want from it and leave the rest.
Agreed.
That's what I would say.
Where do you want to start this out at?
Well, I have notes that I prepared today. I do have what I call a pretext. It's kind of like this little thing. It's going to sound like I plagiarized it, but this is actually in my words, but I wrote it down so I would remember it. And this is kind of the basis that I think about when I think about the prospect of aliens or people from extraterrestrials, people from other worlds, other dimensions coming to this planet, this dimension.
Okay.
And this is kind of the basis that I put together. And basically, what I'm here to tell everybody is the universe is thought to be 13 billion years old. And in the 13 billion years it's been around, and the universe has been expanding, and planets have been created, and it is believed by science that there are actually millions of planets in the universe that are capable of supporting intelligent life, such as we are here on the planet Earth.
Right.
And of those millions of planets, some of these planets have upwards of 1 billion or so year head start on us. And it would be, I think, not crazy to think that if you have 1 billion year head start, look where we are technology-wise, it would be not out of the, it wouldn't be crazy to say that if you had 1 billion year head start, you should be quite beyond where we are if you're a life form like us in any way, shape, or form.
I would think that, yeah.
And because of that, the prospect of what we are talking about here today, in my mind at least, makes it plausible.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, with the new telescope that they put in space last year, I think it was, within, I can't even give you a distance. I know it's like a ridiculous number of light years which is half a millennia or whatever.
Yeah.
Long and the short of it is, with the new telescope, they have much clearer images into space
Sure.
and stars or planets or whatever that were initially thought to just be burning balls of gas appear to have all the right elements to support life.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. And once again, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that, like I say, when I say plausible, I mean it's in my mind it's definitely possible and it's interesting. And this is just information that I've come across. It's kind of a general overview.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm kind of having fun with this, but in the same token, the information I'm giving you is information that I hold in high regard, and is very fascinating to me. And you know that's where we're gonna go. Okay, so why angels are aliens, right?
Okay.
Okay. Interestingly enough, those of you who are familiar with the ancient astronaut theories of Eric von Daniken, this is a man who wrote a book called Chariots of the Gods decades ago. I think it was the 70s. I'm not 100%.
Interestingly enough, that's not the title that he wanted to make the book.
Really?
Yep. When he sent it to the publisher, and the publisher, originally written in German, and the publisher had to translate it to basically sell it outside of Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what the title he wanted to make it was, but the publisher didn't like the title. And so when they did the translation and they're reading through it and all, they noticed that it mentioned Chariots of the Gods in the text. And they're like, that's the title. Boom, there it is.
It's interesting. I think that's a great title. I couldn't imagine it. Honestly, I couldn't imagine it. Like, I think that's one of those titles that you hear and it's like a slam dunk. You're like, well, yeah, of course. Especially when you read the contents within, it's definitely a good title, I think. It's interesting because, just on a sidebar note too, a few years back, I used to work with this guy, and very, very smart guy. He was an engineer, and a very, very staunch atheist.
Okay.
This is not a religious man at all. This is not a man who believes in any woo, none of it. And he loved Chariots of the Gods. It's interesting that a lot of people, so many people believe in a god or in a deity. So many people don't find it hard to believe that there's something out there on a spiritual level that's much better than we are. And that the guy that I knew, and he's a great guy. He's a great guy.
Sure.
He believed in none of that, but he had no problems believing that human life was transplanted here by alien tech. So which is really, I find it fascinating as well. And the older I get, it's weird. The older I get, the more fascinating I find about. Not that that's weird, but a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of people think it's weird. Anyway, the reason why angels are aliens is that there seems to be a common theme in the ancient world. The more you and I dig into it, anyway, that I'm noticing, is that the further you go back, the less you hear of angelic, or shall we say, celestial beings, and the more you hear about things like star people and visitors from other worlds and stuff like that. Like, it seems like the further you go back, that's what it is. And these star people that visited the ancient mostly indigenous groups of people,
Sure,
all had abilities that are shockingly similar to what is described in modern religious texts by these angelic beings. And Eric von Daniken, I'm gonna paraphrase and overview this really simply. He saw that as well, and that's where the material from Chariots of the Gods came from, allegedly. Like him, going through the Bible, working with translations, as you were telling me before, he was translating it into German.
right. So he had gotten so he was raised Catholic, and in the Catholic school that he went to, they were handed the Latin text, and in order for them to learn the material, they translated it to German
Hmm.
themselves. Like they weren't handed a translation; they had to do everything themselves.
Right. That's fascinating, and that's actually a lot of work. You got to comb through stuff with a fine tooth comb to do that. Um, and he was noticing a lot of I don't want to say discrepancies, but he was noticing a lot of stuff that in the translations as he dove down the Bible rabbit hole
Sure.
that that lined up more with perhaps Bronze Age people who weren't educated in things like science or stuff like that, or would have never seen an extraterrestrial. Or wouldn't know if an extraterrestrial came down here in a spacecraft. Why wouldn't you call that a chariot?
Yeah.
If you
I
grew up in the
mean,
Bronze Age, and if this being came out had all these knowledge that you didn't possess, and it had ways to heal you if you were sick, and had ways to perform all these seeming miracles that you see, wouldn't you refer to it as a god or a supreme being of some sort? And he believed that's what was actually happening um, in a lot of these biblical translations.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
To I don't want to say quote him because I don't. I would never be able to remember exactly what he said. But to paraphrase Mr. Von Daniken, he in his beliefs, his God, a deity in general, would not need a vehicle for transportation,
It's true.
would not make mistakes. Right? They are omnipotent,
Yeah, yeah.
and
They kind of hang
so
their
they
hat on
wouldn't
being perfect, right?
exactly right. And they're never wrong, so they wouldn't make mistakes.
Right.
And so one of the things he does talk about, and I thought this was really interesting in doing my research, is he points out, the Christian God, so to speak, uses a vehicle for transportation. And for those of you who follow these faiths, if you've learned or it's been translated differently to you, again, we're sorry. I'm paraphrasing this a lot, but
We're
essentially,
painting with a broad brush, yeah.
in the multiple choirs of, I will call them heavenly beings because they're not directly referenced as angels
Right.
in the Christian Bible. One of the groups are called the thrones, or also known as the wheels.
Hmm.
And these are described or said to be essentially carrying the throne of God. And they appear to have multiple wings,
Hmm.
and their head kind of resembles wheels upon, like inside of wheels
Hmm.
with multiple eyes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's totally believable given the spacecraft that we as anatomically modern humans have built ourselves,
Right.
or even maybe not built but certainly designed. It's totally understandable that if somebody described that to you and this was how, the omnipotent being appeared to you, and so on, it makes sense that that would be seen as a craft.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's like I said, that's kind of undeniable, really. Um, but to get into the actual meat and potatoes about angels, we'll start with angels, okay, and why angels or aliens. Um, Angels, basically, the word angel, as we speak of it today, is a direct anglicization. Is that the right word? It's anglicized from a Latin word called angelus and an ancient Greek word called angelos. And both these words mean the same thing, and it means a messenger. So angels in the minds of the Romans and the Greeks were messengers. And as you said, there's many choirs in angel hierarchy. There's religions devoted completely to angels, um, and some of them have names. As you know, we all have heard of the archangels, for example. Michael and Gabriel and Uriel, and of course Lucifer is another famous one. Uh, these are all the names circused around angels. But it's funny because in my research, and this is my research, is I can't, I haven't been studying this for years or anything. This is just fascinating to me. I went and I was looking.
Not a biblical scholar?
No, I'm not. No.
Okay.
No. No. um, Basically, the term angel and the actual angel or the angelic being in and of itself shows up in texts around the time monotheism is. And what monotheism is, for those of you who don't know, is the belief in one true God. So, when you go back to, say, the Norse and the ancient Greeks and many other ancient cultures, they were polytheists. They believed in different gods. This
Sure.
God controlled this. This God was the god of that. He was the god of war. He's the god of love. He's the god of,
Right.
That's how it was. And it was the Hebrews that were the first true monotheists. And it's in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, where you start to see talks of these angelic beings. And prior to that, in every other ancient culture, you would hear terms like, star people, like I said before. And sorry, guys, I'm just checking my notes here. Star people and examples of the more ancient and older culture. Angels just don't exist. The name doesn't exist. The fact that these are servants of God, messengers, beings that were created without free will to be servants.
Mm-hmm.
None of that applied in any of the ancient cultures. I mean, like I said before, North American, South American, and First Nations and indigenous people, like the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Olmecs, even Australian Aboriginals have accounts of star people.
Sure.
Ancient Egyptians obviously have many accounts of it. The ancient Greeks talked about them. The ancient Essenes talked about them. It's just basically, the further you go back and review the cultures, the less you see of the term angel or angelic being, or sort of like, I'm going to generalize this and say God's henchmen, as it were, his right hands. These guys were created by him to be his servants and his messengers and kind of his personal delivery boys. If you're familiar with the Bible, there was angels that were there just to destroy places. Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed by the angel of death in the Bible, and then the plagues in ancient Egypt, when Moses was trying to free the Israelites, the plagues were also done by angels and stuff like that. The angels biblically are the instruments of God.
Sure.
And prior to monotheism, you don't see that. You see more of the connection with beings from other worlds, other dimensions,
But
coming here.
the ancient culture still looked at these as being deities, though, no?
Yes, a lot of them did. Yes, a lot of them did. And for obvious reasons, these beings were coming here and giving them, at the very least, giving them information, giving them scientific information, giving them, for example, they had knowledge about celestial bodies that they shouldn't have had. They didn't have telescopes. They didn't have, they could see in the sky, and that was it. Yet they had knowledge of worlds and planets and star systems that they weren't able to see.
Sure.
You and I, a few weeks ago, just sitting around shooting the shit, we're talking about the Nazca lines.
Yes.
And these are basically, I mean, there's all kinds of things, but there's the thing that kind of stymies everybody is there's these designs that are in the Nazca Desert in Peru that you could only see from thousands of feet in the air.
They are the, to make a broad comparison, they're kind of the irrefutable, inhoaxable crop circles.
Yeah.
They're not circles. Not that there aren't circles in them, but they are images.
And it's
almost messages, if you like, hieroglyphics even.
Yeah, it's and even depictions of animals here. Like I think there's one of like a lizard or a scorpion or something. Like they have different earthbound, but they're giant, like football field sized things that if you're standing on the ground, you will never see.
Right.
They were designed specifically for people up in the air to see. And thousands of years ago, who was flying? You know what I mean? So once again, another puzzle piece right there that I've always found fascinating. But we're not going to talk about that here today. So if you want to look into that, please do. It's a very popular subject, Nazca
Sure.
lines. You can go on Google it. They'll show you pictures of all of them. They're really cool.
I asked if ancient cultures still refer to them as deities because I was thinking about essentially the Hindu culture, and in their texts, they still refer to them as gods, but they often describe the for lack of a better term spacecraft, more or less, that the gods descend from the heavens in. And actually, if you were to go to India and look at the temples in India, every one of the temples has I won't say the same, but very similar structures on the top, and they all represent these vehicles that the gods were described in using.
I mean, interestingly enough, a lot of them were considered gods or deities of some sort. A lot of them were considered to be, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's probably, I don't know any other word that would translate to a word in English that we would use for 'em maybe. But once again, they were coming here not to conquer, not to overtake, not, at least not in the mind of the ancient peoples. It wasn't.
Sure.
It was, they were here to bring you the gift. They brought them the gift of fire. They brought them the gift of whatever, the gift of astronomy, the gift of
Some sort of knowledge.
yeah, some sort of
Or
knowledge
skill.
that they did not possess, that was going to improve their lives. And ultimately, let's face it, it's a lot easier to get a lot of help from people that worship you, right? I mean, if you're if you're somebody and you give somebody something that it completely changes their life and heals their sick or brings them some sort of whatever it might be. I mean, you give them a grand gift like that, and they worship you and they consider you to be a deity. You could pretty much, they'll do anything you want at that
Yeah.
point, and I can't help but think that that's an advantage on some level. But the stories are out there and they persist throughout human history, written human history anyway. And like I said, in my opinion, now this is my opinion, a lot of the modern religious, I do agree with Von Daniken on this point. A lot of the modern religious stories, if you sift through the Bible, whether it's the Old Testament, the New Testament,
Sure.
you're going to find, and not just the Bible, but any modern religious text, whether it's the Torah or the Quran or the Book of Enoch or whatever, you're going to find examples that, if you look at it through that lens of, well, could this be something extraterrestrial rather than something spiritual or something like that?
Divine.
Divine. There you go. I like that. And yeah, that in and of itself to me is always fascinating. And it's kind of what made me want to talk about it here, because I'm somebody who no, I got an open mind, and when people talk about stuff, I have a hard time shutting it down when it makes some kind of sense to me. I'm somebody who believes that, one person could absolutely be lying about it or misidentifying about it. A handful of people, you take that for what it's worth too. But when thousands and thousands of people over thousands and thousands of years talk about something, it's kind of hard to say that there's an old everybody, if you saw my video about my journey and how it began, the Bigfoot thing, it was really funny. Dr. Grover Krantz, who was a physical anthropologist, was one of the first academics to look into the Bigfoot phenomenon. He used to have a saying when they'd ask him, well, what if all these people are misidentifying it? What if they're lying? What if they're hoaxing? What if they're this and that? And he said, well, let's ask this question. Only one of them got to be right for it to be real.
Yeah.
And, when you look at it from that perspective, obviously, for me, if one person says it, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt because that's just me being a human being, I think. But I find this very fascinating. And a lot of people I talk to think it's neat too. They think it's fascinating. They're not going to abandon their church over it or anything like that, but they do find a lot of these facts fascinating. And what I have here now, these aren't facts. Okay, what I'm about to share with you here.
Despite just saying that they were
Yeah,
facts.
these are facts.
It's
There are some facts out there.
they're like pseudo facts.
I would say the word pseudo is kind of a buzzword to me, because to me what mainstream calls pseudo is just basically this doesn't fit the current narrative that everybody's supposed to have.
Okay.
And it really has nothing to say about the science behind it, and has
Right.
everything to say about the politics behind it, in my opinion.
I'll give you
in my
that.
opinion.
All right.
And we talk about Greg Braden all the time here. Greg Braden is a prime example of that. This is a man who is a scientist, and everything he puts in his books and in his seminars and his YouTube channel and everything is based in science, is peer-reviewed, is tested, and is, in many cases, absolute scientific fact, yet the mainstream still calls what he does pseudoscience, which yeah, you call it whatever you want.
Right.
Labels aren't my thing, but you call it whatever you want. But some of the points I'm about to make here are rabbit holes that are more recent for me, that kind of bolster the ancient astronaut theory. And once again, I say angels or aliens because aliens, I think, could be in some cases. I'm not sitting here and saying that there aren't supreme beings out there. And as in a minute, I'm going to tell you what I've dug up with it. But some of this stuff is explained away with extraterrestrial stuff, and some of this stuff, if you're willing to have an open mind to that, and some of this stuff is even stranger than that, if you could believe. And we're going to get into that here. Okay. First of all, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the podcast. I don't know if I've ever talked about it. I might have. In the early 80s, a series of books came out called The Law of One, The Raw Materials. And the raw materials aren't spelled R-A-W, it's spelled R-A, as in the Egyptian god, sun god, Ra. And it's a very, very, I have not read all the books. I have not read even one complete book. It's set up in like a Q&A form. It's actually a pretty easy read, but Ra is pretty wordy. He in his answers and his questions, it's what they call a channeled work. It's would be like what Bashar does, or Abraham Hicks, or something like that, or even Dolores Cannon, which we'll get to her too in a minute. But in this, it's basically these people channeled this being who said he was Ra. He was the Egyptian sun god, and he basically they were asking him all these questions about life, questions about death, question about ancient history, about all this. And one of the questions they asked him is, are you a god, and what are you really? And excuse me, I am going to paraphrase the hell out of this, because like I said, what he says is very wordy, but he basically says that he is what we as humans here on Earth would call an archangel, like a Gabriel or a Lucifer or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what archangels actually are what he refers to as collective consciousness complexes. Now, what is that? That's pretty wordy, right? What is that? Every planetary system, he goes on to explain, has a collective consciousness, meaning every living being on this planet, we'll just say every human on this planet, we all share a field of consciousness. Quantum physics talks about this a lot. This field of consciousness connects us in a lot of ways. We feed it as much as we receive from it. Right. Our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions go out in this field of consciousness, and we also receive others. It's not like a hive mind like the Borg on Star Trek or something like that. But we're all part of, that is what the term law of one means. We are all, there is no separation. We are all part of this field of consciousness. We are all our own perceivable individuals, not to get too deep, but we are also all part of one great collective as well. And
That's very much like the field that Greg Braden speaks about,
yes,
which they've scientifically proven exists.
yes, absolutely. See, facts. There they are.
That's a legit fact.
That is a legit fact. You're right. And basically, what he said is that when a planetary system has a major catastrophe and all life is lost on it, the collective consciousness doesn't die. You know, it's eternal. And what happens is that when they all die in a catastrophe, this planetary system and all its, we'll call it soul or consciousness or whatever, souls come together and form one supreme being, high density supreme being called the collective consciousness complex. And that is what he is.
Okay.
And that is what archangels are, he says. And he also said that the question was also posed to him, okay, well, what planet were you from? What planet died for you to become who you are? And he said he was the collective consciousness complex of the planet Venus. Now, this was in the early 1980s.
Right.
And at that point, our science said, yeah, no, intelligent life never existed on the planet Venus. It's too inhospitable for that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Now, this was in the early 80s. And he said then that there was a catastrophe on that planet that extinguished all life 375 million years ago. And you fast forward to, the 2010s, I believe it happened, and I don't know the exact year. But with our later technology, our rover technology, the new telescopes we have and the new systems we have, we are actually able to get some really good data and pictures of the planet surface of Venus. And lo and behold, there are structures there. There are structures there that were not formed by nature, that were built by people that had knowledge of architecture and things like that. And once again, that is a fact. Here is a educated guess. They estimate the age of these structures to be upwards of 400 million years old, which would be right. He said 375. They're saying maybe 400. It's right in that ballpark.
Sure.
It's right in that ballpark. So in a way, to me, that's an interesting. I'm not going to say it validates anything, but that's an
Well, it's a correlation for
yeah,
sure.
it's an interesting correlation at that. So yeah, that's what Ra had to say about what archangels are. And like I said, there is a little bit of validity. I believe that there's a lot of points, and I mean a lot of points like that in the raw materials, the Law of One. I think I heard somewhere that there are over 100 of those little tidbits that he pointed out in the books that later were proven to be scientifically accurate. So if you have the time, and you're going to need some time, if you have the time and that interests you, the Law of One, the raw materials, you can get it on Amazon, have it delivered right to your house. You can ebook it, you can do whatever you want, and you can read it. And from what I understand of it, it's fascinating. And there's a lot of people on YouTube that have videos about it. Case Parks, one of my favorite guys, he did a short video thing about some of the Law of One stuff last year that was really, really cool. So check it out.
Add it to your reading list.
Yes, please. It's fast. It's cool stuff, really. And now, I said before I'd mentioned Dolores Cannon. Dolores Cannon, for those of you who don't know, we might have mentioned. I think we mentioned her before.
I'm sure we've mentioned her at least once.
Yeah. She was an author, obviously, but she also was a hypnotherapist, and she developed a new type of hypnotherapy where she would actually take the person in hypnotic regression back so deeply that they were talking to what modern spiritualists would call your higher self, or the God part of you, the eternal part of you, the Akashic record part of you, the part of you that knows everything, the divine part of you.
Indeed.
And she did this thousands and thousands of times to thousands and thousands of people all over the world over a period of probably 4 decades or more, and wrote several books of the information that was shared. And these people were literally sharing information, like exact information a lot of times.
Right.
And these people didn't know each other. They were from some cases different parts of the world, never met, never knew each other. Sometimes it was from different decades even, but they all were sharing the same information. And she would ask these questions, and the sessions got more deeper as her knowledge base grew of it. And she wrote several books. And two books that we talk about a lot are the Three Waves of Volunteers and Keepers of the Garden. And Keepers of the Garden is basically the knowledge that she had received from all these people about how human life and life in general, but especially human life, was planted here and seeded here by extraterrestrials. And that in and of itself is fascinating to me. But when you read the DNA research that we talked about in human
Sure.
origin, that correlates with it once again, because Homo sapiens sapien, anatomically modern humans, are not a product of evolution. It's a genetic fact. We were engineered. Our telomeres are fused. That can occur in nature. Our human chromosome number 2 and number 6 and 7, I believe, are the smoking guns in that. Stuff that has been manipulated on there made us, we are completely and totally unique from any other hominid form that we know of on this planet. But check that video out, and you'll see what we're talking about there. That's two-part video, actually.
It is a two-part video.
Two-part video.
Spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it yet. We appeared like 200,000 years ago.
Yes, yeah. And
just no evidence of where we came from. Just
like
we exist.
like the genetic big bang of the primate world. Just boom, there we were. And so Keepers of the Garden has a lot of facts that actually correlate with that. And Three Waves of Volunteers, I want to say we mentioned this somewhere along the line. I feel like we did. Three Waves of Volunteers is actually about this other phenomenon that she kept stumbling across is that people that are here on the planet right now, a lot of them are what they call waves from the volunteers that came in three waves that started in the 1950s, basically after World War II, after we blew up the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, and allegedly intelligences outside of the planet saw that we were tampering with some pretty dangerous stuff and decided that since there's free will on this planet and they can't literally come here and make us do anything, we needed to be an inside job. So
Indeed.
A call went out, according to Dolores Cannon. Now, this is her book. This is what she was finding out from hypnotic regression from thousands of people. And a call went out, and a bunch of people, a bunch of beings from all over the universe chose to come here and incarnate into human form, some of them never being on Earth ever, and coming here to try to help the planet Earth by raising its vibration of its people and assisting Earth into its ascension into fourth density, which has already started, actually. And there is scientific evidence and proof for that as well. We've never talked about it. But it's really cool. It has a lot to do even with the Mayan calendar. I'm not going to get into it, but the Earth is shifting into from third density to fourth density.
But if you want more information on that, leave it in the comments.
Please comment, say something. We're all ears. And that's what that was about. So, yeah, Dolores Cannon, Three Waves of Volunteers. These volunteers came here to help the Earth and to help humanity with its ascension, and to help it along. Just come here and being, like I said, in some cases, these souls, it was their first time on the planet Earth. They've never been to a place like this before, and the feedback wasn't good. They didn't really care for all our wars and all our evil and all our, we're not, as despite our intelligence and despite our lovely divine spark in all of us, we do a lot of bad.
Highly
things.
recommended. Add it to your reading list.
Yes. Three Waves of Volunteers and Keepers of the Garden. But once again, based on actual work that Dolores Cannon was doing. She was. I'm sorry, she's passed away now. She was a hypnotherapist, and this was work that she did for decades. And like I said, thousands of people all over the world didn't know each other, didn't ever have a conversation with each other, put under hypnotic regression, a deep hypnotic regression, and she said she was talking to their higher self. And all of it, all the information, it wasn't like one person said this and one person said that. Thousands of people all verified each other. So that's very,
It's so coincidental that it's too coincidental
yeah,
to be a
yeah,
coincidence.
yeah, exactly. I'm not big on coincidences in my life anymore. I'm really not. Okay, so that was another example. Another example is something that's fascinated. You and I have talked about this privately. The concept of the star seed. And that goes back a little bit to what I was just talking about with Dolores Cannon. Now, what a star seed is an individual that incarnated here on the planet who has never lived on the planet Earth before. They are completely alien to it. So, according to this, what Dolores Cannon said, and what a lot of modern spiritual people talk about, a lot of us are probably first timers to the planet that are here. And not a lot of, a fair amount of us, I guess. I don't think there is a number. I don't see how anybody would know that.
That's true. I would say there's probably a good number of them.
Yeah. And they talk about this, and those people who have never had human souls before are called star seeds. And I find this very, very fascinating. I've always found the concept of reincarnation fascinating. I look into it. And it's very interesting to me. And it would make sense if reincarnation is a thing. It would make sense that, and we know that life exists on other worlds. It would make sense that why wouldn't every now and again you'd spend some time on another planet in an incarnation,
Sure.
in a different body. That would make, if reincarnation was a thing, that would make sense to me. I don't know, making sense out of the senseless, but as a lot of people would say. But it's fascinating to me. And once again, these people are here to help with the Earth's ascension. These people are here to help us sort of get by the rough patches that is caused by a fourth density ascension that is occurring. I mean, it's kind of interesting that the fourth D transition, according to for example, I want to say, was it Greg Braden or Joe Dispenza? Somebody made a comment in one of their seminars about it. I think it was Greg, because he was talking about the Mayan calendar, and the Mayan calendar ended in 2012. And those of you who are, I'm sure most of you were around for that. It was just 11 years ago. There was a lot of people that thought the world was going to end, and there was all these horrible catastrophes that were going to happen, and that wasn't the case at all. Anybody who understood what the Mayan calendar was about knew that it was just simply the end of I think it was a 5,500 year cycle,
Something to that
in the
extent,
Mayan
yeah.
calendar, or something like that. But what it also was the end of the third density on the planet Earth. It was the end of what is called the age of Pisces. The New Age people we are now in what is called the age of Aquarius, the age of enlightenment and unconditional love. And the fourth density has started here on the planet Earth, and the fourth density coincides with the fourth chakra, which is the heart chakra, which is the chakra of unconditional love. And as you could see, when you try to change something that's very harsh and dense into something that's more about love and light and all that, there's a lot of upheaval. And I think a lot of people would say there's a lot of upheaval in our social structure on the planet Earth right now.
Sure.
And a lot of people think this is why. Now, I know what you're going to say. Well, Tara, that's just a bunch of New Age nonsense. That's just a bunch of, where's your claims to validate that, other than, a couple of books? Well, here's an interesting fact, and this is a fact. Right after the Mayan calendar ended, which I believe was in, what month was that? Was that December of 2012?
I want to say it was December.
December of 2012.
No, I'm sorry, September.
September, I'm sorry, of 2012. Right after that ended and the hoopla died down, there are geologists on the planet, and there's this thing called the Schumann resonance. The Schumann
Okay.
resonance, if for those of you who don't know, is the overall average resonant vibrational frequency of the planet Earth itself.
Okay.
Everything vibrates at a resonant frequency. Everything. You, me, this table, the planet, everything. We're all frequency and vibration. Everything is in the universe. And the Earth is no exception. It has its own resonant frequency, which is called the Schumann resonance.
Sure.
And it's been pretty much constant globally for as long as we're watching it. And there are literally seismologists and geologists all over the world that monitor through things like seismographs and stuff like that, the Earth and its normal thing. Right after the Mayan calendar ended, the Schumann resonance changed abruptly, and it started to get faster and in a higher pitch. It was raising in vibration and frequency, which is what you would expect if it was transitioning from a third density to a fourth density, and it still is continuing to do that. And that is a scientific fact. You could look that up. So isn't that kind of interesting that right after the Mayan calendar ended, and right after, not right after, but years after Dolores Cannon wrote all these books about how these beings were coming here because the Earth was ascending into a new density and it was going to cause all this upheaval, and then this happens, and this is actually, that right there is a scientific fact and result.
Sure.
So keep that in mind.
Strong correlation there.
Yeah, keep that in mind. That's all I'm saying. So that's the starseed. Now we're gonna get biblical now. I too was raised Catholic, by like Mr. Von Daniken was, and because of that, that means I'm not Jewish. So I don't read a lot of the Old Testament. I find it fascinating, but I was raised Catholic, which means I'm a Christian, which means I'm kind of New Testament territory. But in the Old Testament, there's the book of Genesis, creation. Genesis 6, chapter 6. Now, I'm not going to give verses because there are a lot, but it's all in Genesis chapter 6 when I'm about to give you this information. And this talks about the fallen angels. Okay, now what are the fallen angels? Well, story goes, and biblical scholars are finding out that this story is actually not very accurate. The fall of Satan. We were talking about this the other day. The most famous story is the fall of Satan. Satan challenged God, went to war and lost, and God cast him out of paradise, and he fell from his grace and became the ruler of hell.
I actually just heard today while doing some research on this. There's I will say, a description of it that Lucifer was cast out along with his followers, which accounted for a third of the angel population in heaven.
That's probably true. From what by what accounts were. But the scholars now say that that's actually a mistranslation. That Lucifer was not cast out of heaven. Lucifer actually elected to leave and take his followers with him. So that's one thing. Biblical scholars are coming around to that notion. I mean, you're translating something from a dead language. There's going to be revisions and stuff like that.
Sure.
But in Genesis 6, now this part is also in the process of speculation, but for years this was the story, so I'm going to go with that right now, but I'll also tell you what the revision is. Talks about fallen angels and the Nephilim. Nephilim I have brought up before, once again in my story. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's about what got me into the unexplained and the weird and the woo, and that's also out there. It's called Terry's Journey. Check it out.
Sure.
I brought up the Nephilim and that, but this is where it comes from. This is one of the passages the Nephilim were made from, and basically, what the passage says was the angels when they fell to earth. Now the angels in almost all the Old Testament texts are referred to as the sons of God. Okay, that's how they refer to them, the sons of God. The sons of God seen the daughters of man. Daughters of man are human women. Okay. and they took them as their wives and bore children with them. God saw this as an abomination.
Right.
It's actually one of the reasons why God destroyed the world with water and told Noah to build the ark. He wanted to destroy these
In that text.
children. Yes, wanted to destroy these children. Later in the text. This is Genesis 6. That came a little later. Genesis 6 talks about that. Now, in the first passage you read, now this is where the confusion comes in, I think, with the translations. The first passage read that basically the sons of God took the daughters of men as their wives, and they bore them children, and these children were abominations to God. Okay, whatever. Now, I'm going to actually try to... My pen was dying when I wrote this, so I tried to keep writing it because I was under a little bit of a time crunch. So if I stumble over some stuff, I apologize. Okay, the translation right after it says about them taking human women as wives and having children.
Right.
There's the next passage that says that the Nephilim, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and afterwards. They were great heroes and warriors. Okay, so when you say in this one line that, angels and humans had children, and then the next line, the Nephilim were here on earth in those days and afterwards, and they were great warriors and heroes, you would automatically think the Nephilim would refer to the children. Biblical scholars now don't think that's what it is. However, the narrative that I grew up with was that the Nephilim were the offspring of angels and children. And in other texts throughout the holy books, the book of Enoch in particular, talks about these children were actually giants. And they were, they were giants, and they didn't. And there's pictures. There's over the millennia, there's been pictures drawn of them. Some of them have depicted that they're quite giant, like 20, 30 feet tall. Some of them are depicted as being like 10, 12 feet tall. Some of them are depicted covered in hair. Some of them,
I mean, we do have scientific proof that giants have existed in the past.
Absolutely.
They've
right
got full-on skeletons
Yes.
that are 15 to 20 feet tall.
Yes. Here in North America.
Yeah.
Here in North America. And here's another thing, just for you conspiracy theorists out there. I like that word. I don't put any stock in it. I think it's a bullshit word. But for you conspiracy theorists out there, every example we have of giants and giant bones were sent to the Smithsonian. And guess what the Smithsonian can't find anymore?
The skeletons?
Yes. They've just disappeared. All of them. That's amazing. And when I mean all of them, I don't mean 2 or 3. I mean dozens of examples here in North America. Unbelievable. Okay, back to Genesis 6. Now, here's the thing. Biblical scholars, as I was just saying, are kind of putting in doubt that the Nephilim were, in fact, not putting in doubt that angels and humans, copulated and had children, but putting in doubt that they were actually what that passage was referring to as the Nephilim. And in their research, they believe now that the Nephilim may actually, this is their opinion, may actually be connected to Gilgamesh. And when they talk about the great warriors and the great heroes, they somehow traced it back to Sumeria and the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I'd like to comment on
that, if
I may.
Please.
So for those of you who may or may not be familiar with the Epic of Gilgamesh, it is really just like, it's a small section. There's a lot of information in the small section of the Sumerian text that talks about Gilgamesh. But one thing it does mention, and I thought this was very interesting, given biblical scholars are saying that the Nephilim, which are also said to be giants, are, for lack of a better term, children of Gilgamesh. As a boy, Gilgamesh, and I want to say his brother, but don't quote me on that because it may have just been a friend. Anyway, they were sort of going through a rite of passage right? And they were sent on a quest to defeat a giant in the woods. And this giant has like apparently been there. It's always existed, and it was causing issues. And as a rite of passage, they were sent out to defeat this giant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's interesting that biblical scholars are saying this sort of seems like these are more like a Sumerian Gilgamesh kind of thing. And the Sumerian text says giants have already existed before Gilgamesh.
Right. Which is, it's interesting.
Not saying that they're not, because female giants could be a thing, should be a thing.
I would think so, because you're not going to have little giants without female giants.
Right.
That's common sense to me. But interestingly enough, here's where I'm going to kind of make the loop around, but what I'm getting at. Let's say that von Daniken's theory that these angels that married and had relations with human females were in fact not angels, but extraterrestrials. And these beings, we'll call them the Nephilim for right now, because I don't know what to call them, because right now that's a question mark.
Okay.
These beings that were born from these union, I guess you could call it.
All right.
Would be genetically different.
100%.
And as we know from the human origin and from all the different sources that we cited in that, human beings are genetically anatomically modern human beings are genetically modified.
Right.
What if this was a biblical account of some sort of modification process, even though it was just, whether it was an angel or an alien, it is non-human interbreeding with human, which genetically, according to our modern medical science, is not possible naturally.
Right.
But yet occurred. And it occurred allegedly, maybe even with our creation. So to me, it's not as simple as, okay, I'm an angel or an alien, I'm going to breed with a human, and I'm going to make a giant. It's probably more of a much more technical thing than that. But that's how a person who was observing this from the Bronze Age would interpret it, and
I can see that,
and would write it down, or at least that's how it's getting translated.
Right.
So that's the other part of it. That's the other part why. Well, that's the reason why I titled this "Angels or Aliens," not because I'm saying that there aren't divine beings out there that have influence or have influenced us throughout our history, and I definitely have an open mind with that, and I definitely have an open mind with the fact that an extraterrestrial, a being from another world, a being from another time or dimension even, have come here in our past to help out. Like I said before, only one of these things have to be real for it to be true.
I mean, I wouldn't want to ruffle any feathers.
No.
But I personally feel, and this is just my opinion, folks, don't roast me too hard. Let's assume for a moment that there is a divine being, or divine beings, whichever the case may be. Assuming that, they are the omnipotent, I feel like it would just be ignorant. And ignorance, by the way, folks, is just not knowing. I feel like it would be ignorant of us to think that an almighty, an omnipotent, a deity, if you will, would pick this one rock out of the entire universe and say, this is where I'm going to start life, and only here.
Right.
And I'm going to forget that the rest of the universe exists. Don't care.
And the other thing too is that science is, I feel like science and spirituality are starting to kind of connect in a way.
I would agree with that.
I think that, let's face it, there's mainstream narratives that a lot of people have take issue with, I would say, and there are scientists that are out there doing work and finding these correlations, as you would say, in both of the things. And the gaps between the two of them are getting smaller and smaller every year, I feel like.
Sure. Case in point, just as an example, each, I will say, major Western religion. So, Christians, Hebrews, Muslims, all of their texts speak of a great flood. And actually, if I may be so bold, almost every, I will say, almost every religion, and certainly ancient peoples, have a story about a great flood.
Yeah.
That happens for different reasons, but certainly the major Western religions all talk about a great flood for essentially the same reason. And science has proven that this flood has existed at roughly the same time that the major Western religion texts say it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, if you don't know this, you can look it up. This is another one of those pseudoscience things. But the thing that it says in the Bible that when the water receded in the flood, that Noah's Ark was stuck on the mountain of Ararat in Turkey. And now Westerners are not allowed to go on that mountain. The Turkish government does not allow any expeditions or whatever. But I think it was about 20, maybe even 30 years ago at this point. I remember I was maybe a teenager, so probably more like 30 years ago. There was a plane flying over Mount Ararat in the summertime, and some of the ice on the top of it was receding and had melted. Some of the glaciers were receding and melted. And he took a picture, this pilot took a picture of what looks like the bow of a very large wooden boat. And that was on news and like mainstream news and everything. So guys are interested, Google that up. The pictures of it are on the internet. You can check it out. It's pretty fascinating. It once again, just another correlation, another thing that may lend credence to something for somebody. I find all of this stuff fascinating. I'm a big believer in take what you want from everything and leave the rest, and whatever piece fits in your puzzle, take it,
Sure.
use it. And I'm somebody who believes that whatever you hold to believe to be true, and this is even said in the Bible. This was said by Jesus in the Bible, actually. Whatever you hold true to believe here on earth, I'll hold true in heaven.
Right.
And basically, he says, whatever you believe to be true, I will honor.
We also say that. For those of you who have seen my story, you already know that. Big believer in Wicca.
Yeah.
Same thing, as above, so below.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Right?
100%. I'm a big believer of that. I believe whatever you hold in your heart to believe to be true is inherently true. So there's a lot of great stuff here, that we're just putting it out there. We're just sharing it.
I want to get off this tangent for a second, double back to the angels versus aliens thing, because I just thought of something that I thought was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So Von Daniken had a show on the Gaia Network.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how recent it is, to be honest. They don't put dates on these things. It's not like YouTube.
Yeah.
But he talks about, on the one episode, I don't remember a lot of the Bible. It has literally been decades since I've read any of it. So don't murder me too much if I just butcher everything about this. But the story goes that someone, a big name in the scripture, so to speak, was visited by God or angels or something to that extent. Anyway, he's talking about when they were arriving. The sound that the craft made was that of a thundering of waterfalls,
Mm-hmm.
and it was loud like thunder, and then proceeds to describe what he was looking at. And apparently, in the original Hebrew text, it is very detailed description. And I don't remember the name of the engineer, but an engineer literally took this description and wrote it all down and literally made a scale model of this craft. Okay, and this is kind of, it looks like a flying saucer that has 4 legs with essentially rotary or helicopter blades on each leg. All right. Now, the story goes on to say the name of the gentleman, the angels or what have you, took him, and from what I remember, the story goes, took him far to a very high mountain, not just a high mountain, a very high mountain. And when they arrived there, he met essentially a man in a sparkling suit who handed him a measuring device and asked him to measure the temple. Everything, height, width, stairs, all that. And he goes through, measures it all, and all of these measurements apparently are described very thoroughly in the original text. And so there was an architect. Again, I don't remember their name, but they took all these measurements and built a scale model. And it kind of looks like one of the modern football stadiums, believe it or not. It is like, it's open in the middle, kind of square, comes out into like a courtyard area. And Mr. Von Daniken heard about these 2 guys and brought them together. And they took the scale model of the craft, and it fits precisely into the stadium, almost as if the stadium was built specifically for that craft.
Awesome.
Then archaeologists, and I don't remember when, but they unearthed well, at the time they were calling it a temple, a structure, if you will, on the top of a mountain in South America. And I don't remember the name of the mountain, but it's like northern South America, but on like the west coast. It's like the highest mountain in South America. They unearthed this thing. And there is zero evidence of a culture existing there. Like, there's no evidence that, a culture started and grew, and it just is here.
Right.
And what they've unearthed, almost to a T, matches what is described in the original Hebrew text.
That's awesome. The internet, there's examples of that all over the planet. There really is. You could watch a lot of the old Ancient Alien, not that it's that old, but like History Channel had Ancient Aliens, and there's a lot of episodes that you can watch for free on YouTube. If you're into this topic at all, I suggest checking them out. There's a lot of great information on there.
Additionally, you can subscribe to Discovery Plus, and you get...
Yeah, you could do that too.
You get the History Channel shows.
Yeah, that would be great. Check all that, or you could ask us to look into anything you'd like to, and we'll do that.
Sure,
that's what
if
the
you like
comment
listening to
section's
us
for.
talk about it, we'll do the research for you.
Right, we'll get it out to you in an hour.
Or so.
Or so. I'm sure there's going to be some epic. I think that's why we recently did a human origin one, and that was a 2-parter because we realized we just had more information that 1 hour would allow, so we did it in 2 1-hour videos. But check it out, and I think that's kind of all I've got, really. Like I said, I didn't want to get hugely deep into anything, but once again, as you see, as I talk, I go down different tangents and rabbit holes. I go down. I'm the guy who goes down one rabbit hole and then gets thrown off in a bunch of other tangents too, because this fits this piece to me, and that fits that piece to that puzzle and me, and that, and I'm just kind of all over the place in that.
This is literally our off-camera conversations.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, that's kind of what we decided we wanted to do when we did this. You know, we were just sitting around in the living room, you know, shooting the shit about all this stuff. And one day we were just like, you know what, let's share some of this stuff. Let's get some of this stuff out there. Maybe
Sure.
somebody's got to think it's cool other than me and you, right? I mean,
I agree. As we tend to do on this podcast, we painted with a very broad brush.
yeah.
If you want more information on it, we are not experts by any means. We'll be happy to do the research, throw out something more detailed for you. Let us know in the comments.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's unless you have anything further to add.
No, I think we painted a pretty broad picture here that we made some excellent points, but obviously there's no clear decision on either side of the fence, whether
yeah.
it's angels or aliens. But I think it's really cool information.
I don't think that's what any of this is about. I think it's about, like I said, putting it out there, showing what we know, what we think, what we find interesting, and take from it what you want. And,
I agree. It was more
and
about
leave the rest. Have fun with it.
It was more about opening the possibilities,
Absolutely,
so to speak.
absolutely, 100%. So,
So-
I guess with that being said, I've been Terry,
I've been Will.
and
This
you guys.
has been Jefferson.
And this is Jefferson. You guys
Join us next time on What If Down the Rabbit Hole.
be good, guys.
We've tried our best to provide all perspectives on these topics. If this type of content speaks to you or interests you, please subscribe to get notified when new episodes are released. Check out the show notes for all the references discussed. Do your own research, formulate your own opinion. Join us next time on What If Down the Rabbit Hole.